if you look at question number one asks, what's the significance of Buddhism within the continent of Asia? How did it spread? Who was responsible for the spread? What we're talking about there is, it starts in what country? India. Starts in India. King who is responsible for its spread within India? No, look at number 3. King Ashoka. And then as it spreads out of India, it moves into China. And then it takes over China and becomes the state religion of the Han Dynasty, much like Christianity became the state religion of Rome. So you're talking India into China, and then China into Korea, and then into Japan. Where yesterday we saw the form of Buddhism in Japan becomes what? What was yesterday? Zen. Okay. So that's what we're looking at in that question, is how does it spread? Who's responsible? You're going to want to talk about Ashoka. You're going to want to talk about the Han Dynasty. You're going to want to talk about how it became the official religion of these places, and the government had, being the official religion of the government, it had a key role in sort of creating that. Okay. The second question, what are the varying schools of thought within Buddhism? Here you're going to talk about Mahayana Buddhism. You're going to talk about Theravada Buddhism. There's a PowerPoint that I did on that. You're going to talk about Zen Buddhism. There's Pure Land Buddhism. There's all kinds of different sects or divisions within Buddhism. Where, how, why did they originate? So Zen Buddhism, we're talking about coming from China, Bodhidharma and Chan Buddhism, Zen Buddhism in Japan. Mahayana Buddhism, we're talking about, in the major portions of China. Theravada Buddhism, where it originates. The key part of that question is what separates them from each other. Mahayana Buddhism is very different than Theravada Buddhism. Zen Buddhism is sort of a renaissance. It's sort of, it's more of a reformation of the way Buddhism actually was focused and what it was focused on. In Zen Buddhism, what's the focus of Buddhist practice? The primary practice should be what? Meditation. And so that is different than what these other forms of Buddhism look like. Questions on those two so far? Okay. If you look at number 3, it's asking us who was King Ashoka? And how is King Ashoka related to Hammurabi of Mesopotamian civilization? We're talking about what in this case? What did Ashoka do that's very similar to what Hammurabi did? What's that? Not necessarily spread a religion with Hammurabi. We're talking about here are the laws, here are the rules, here are the expectations. Posting them throughout the civilization for everybody to know. So Hammurabi takes that and does the same thing. Ashoka uses that same system. Let's let everybody know what we're talking about, what the expectations are. If we look then at the other parts of the question, Cyrus the Great, Constantine, what are the comparisons there? What's the key part we learned about Cyrus the Great? Yeah.
What the people were, he just said that they followed him instead of making their own religion.
Right, so we're talking religious tolerance. We're talking expanding territory, but also being understanding of the different religious practices that were in place. Constantine, what does Constantine do for the Roman Empire? Especially in terms of religion. Constantine takes and makes official what religion in the Roman Empire? Christianity. And so just as Constantine does that with the Roman Empire, Ashoka does this with the Mauryan Empire in India. Same situation. And then, of course, answering the question, why is he important? Spread of Buddhism, solidifying the empire within India, those kinds of things. Number 4 is, why would the Chinese and Japanese see the Mongols as barbarians? Well, here we're talking about, and you need to focus on, how the Mongols are attempting to take over this Chinese territory. They're attempting to cripple and eliminate Chinese emperors, which they did. And then, of course, they expanded to the largest land empire in world history. So that's China. But Japan, we didn't really talk about this, but let me explain it right now. The Mongols twice in the 13th century attempted to invade and cross the Sea of Japan and invade Japan. They were unsuccessful. And they were unsuccessful because typhoons came and stopped their ships from hitting the Japanese mainland. Those winds, known as the divine wind, is called what in Japanese? Look at your sheet. This is the kamikaze. The divine winds stopped the Mongols from invading Japan. And because of that, the Japanese said, oh, this is the work of the gods. This is how they were stopped. And so that becomes known as the kamikaze, and we see that come later again in World War II. Number 5, what influence did China have on the cultural geography of Asia at this time? If you go back in your notebooks at the very first day when we started talking about Asia, we started talking about geography, and we started talking about how China influences Vietnam and influences Korea and influences Japan. In particular, language, art, social structure. Because China was the dominant force in the continent, on the continent, you have these cultural influences that come from it as well. In the section, it's one of the early chapters in the book. I want to say 5 or 6, but it talks about what is this cultural influence of China on Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and it continues, right? So in Japan, the alphabet and language is a Chinese root. So you have this constant cultural influence in terms of religion, language, art, architecture, culture, all those things. So when we look at least these first 5, there's a lot of information. And tomorrow I will tell you which chapter sort of they come from, so that might help you out.